Okay, hello there. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. It's a Saturday for a change, so a different day, different time. I usually don't stream on Saturdays or on the weekends, um, but there's some stuff in my head um, that I want to work on with the bots that we're building, and I had a few hours to spend today before the Formula One uh, qualification that is in 2 hours from now. So I thought, well, let's just jump in and get uh, get it out of my head and into the bot. And while I was doing that, why not show that to you guys out there, you people? So here we are on a Saturday on a different time than you may be used to. And today I want to dive into sending proactive messages from the bot to the user. So this is a scenario where the bot will send messages to the user without the user initiating the conversation. The prerequisite is that the user has started a conversation with the bot at a point in time. So that could be somewhere in the past, so an hour ago or days ago. That doesn't really matter, especially not for a Teams bot. And the bot will send a message to that user because it wants to update them on some status information, or wants to notify them, or wants to get some feedback from them. Whatever the scenario, we want to make it possible for the bot to initiate a dialogue with the user. And I've been thinking for ways for how to do that, and I think I have come up with a decent solution where we will create a separate flow or a separate logic app that handles the proactive dialogue. And we create a specific trigger to register such a proactive dialogue. And we create an action so that from another flow or another logic app, we can start a proactive dialogue with a user of which we do not know the conversation reference. And why would I cut it in two different flows or two different logic apps? Because one other solution would be that I would create an action to start a dialogue, which would then return me that conversation reference, if that user has a conversation reference, that is. The reasons to not do that are twofold. So one, that would mean that we need to handle that dialogue within that same logic app or flow. And I am thinking about scenarios where we, for example, fetch a list of users that we want to notify or want to start a conversation with. So we're going to iterate over all those users, and we need to manage the conversations for all those users in the same logic app. That's not really going to scale well, and it's not really easy to understand if there's something going wrong. So that's one reason why I want to split it up, so that we can have one logic app or one flow retrieving a list of users and initiating conversations with all those users, which will spawn additional flows or additional logic apps. That's one reason. The other reason why I do not want to why I want to split it up like this is because I can imagine that since the bot will proactively contact the user, that not all users are gonna be happy about that. So there might be situations, or there might be conversations that the bot starts that the user is not interested in or is annoyed with. And by splitting it up, it means that the flow or the logic app initiating the conversation through the action that we're going to create, it will actually go through our API first, and we can have some logic within the API to determine not to start a conversation with that user. For example, if the user has set their preferences not to be disturbed by the bot at all, or for specific scenarios. For example, if we were to create a scenario where the bot will contact the user to ask them, for example, what do you think of this experience? Just to get some feedback on the bot that we've built. I can imagine that the user does not want to get that message at all, or every once in a few days or something like that. So I want to enable the user to tell the bot, please do not disturb me anymore with these types of messages. And I'd like to have the bot ask the user that after the first time that it has sent such a message. And the next time that the bot tries to start that same dialogue, we can filter out those messages within our API and not start that dialogue at all, transparently to the calling or the initiating logic app or flow, if that makes sense. So that's the second reason why I would want to split it up in two pieces. All right, enough talk. I want to get started now. So there are two things that we want to create. First, we want to create a new trigger to register a proactive dialogue. So that's the name that I'm going for at the moment. And the other thing that we're going to create is an action that we can use that will list the available proactive dialogues that we can start, and will accept the input for a UPN of a user, and will then try to start a conversation with that user. So that's what we are trying to do today. So let's jump in and let's see how to do that. All right, so I've been prepping everything so that we can continue developing. So the last thing that I was trying to figure out is if the bot can still zoom out a little, can still connect to my local host. So let's try to say hi, and it will go through the ng-rock if that's correct, and here it goes. And my bot says hey back, which is exactly the scenario that we need. So this way I can test through Teams, and it will actually call my local instance of the bot that I'm running here in debug mode, so that I can quickly test stuff out and ensure that everything is working. And well, that appears to be working, and if everything is correct, I have set up a demo, and the demo should be here. And the demo is not doing anything right now, but I want to ensure that it's running this demo, and it isn't. So either the demo didn't register correctly, or we need to figure that out. It did register the smart dialog, I think, for demo. So why is it not? How many? Because I think I also created a flow for it, so maybe it's confused now. Let's go to flow. Yeah, this looks like it's just a smart source, which is something else entirely. So what's going on then? I wanted to check out. So let's go to the test resource group. And then let's take a look at the Cosmos DB. And here we have the Data Explorer, and something that I learned about yesterday is there's also a full screen. Version. You can go there by going to this, clicking this button, or you can go to cosmos.azure.com. And it's just a little bit nicer to work with. So here we go. So I have here a smart dialog for demo. Let's see. Let's filter on the type so we can view all smart dialogues. And we should have just one for the demo, and also for this tenant ID. So maybe we can filter on the tenant ID as well. And see that tenant ID equals that. And as we notice, there are two, and probably that's because we have some flow running somewhere, I think. We haven't really taken care of that yet, so let's remove it for now, so that we have one single demo. Dialog. Now let's try it again. It should start this one. So it's not sending anything back, so it keeps telling me that it's typing and it will time out eventually. So let's build a simple flow using all the components that we have so far. So for example, we can ask the user, so we need to input our conversation reference each time so that the action understands where to send the message to. And for example, what's your name? We can prompt for choice. So again, the conversation reference, what kind of pizza you like, and then we can have a few options that we can input like this. just add a couple. And we can, for example, do a confirm. Are you sure you want a? And we can use the output from the other actions as part of the input for other actions. Finally, we want to make a decision, for example. So have a condition, and for example, if the result is true, then we want to send a different message. And when the result is false, so we can also send messages. So we can say, okay, and then the name of the user, and then the name of the pizza. Pizza is on its way. I'm sorry, that should be in the text. Over here we should have the conversation reference. And over here we also send a message. There's the conversation reference. The screen is a little bit small, so I have to scroll. Conversation reference. No problem. Come back later when you've made a choice. And this way we have created a simple conversation. So now we can start the conversation by typing demo. It'll ask me my name. It'll ask me what pizza I like. I'm sure I want this pizza. Okay, pepperoni pizza is on its way. So this is how quick we can create conversations right now. So let's add an action so that we can start a new conversation from the bot without the user initiating the conversation. Therefore, we're gonna create a new trigger. And to do that, we're gonna open up our Open API specification. Let's view the outline. And first we're gonna, well, let's close everything. For example, here we have a trigger to register a smart dialog, which is a dialog that the user initiates. Not sure what this could be removed, I think, in the future. But we want to have a different type of dialog for proactive dialogues. So we're gonna call them proactive dialogues. As I can tell, they're not really ordered alphabetically. That might be a good idea to do that. And we have here smart dialogues. We have there smart dialogues. Let's continue. So we want to create proactive dialogues. So we're going to go here. I'm going to call them proactive dialogues. For now, let's not use a dynamic schema. Let's just use a fixed schema. I don't think we need a dynamic schema anyway. And this is a type of object. Let's add a comma there. We have some properties. So one of the things that we need to receive is the user. And how did we have to find it in the dynamic schema? Let's check out the. Now we should check out the. Here is where we. Get schema. So it's a UPN. Basically, we want to have the UPN and the conversation reference. So make one called UPN. I'm doing this wrong. Okay, so let's just take a look at one of the definitions. For example, the message activity. Properties. Oh, properties is an array. Sense. It's objects. There we go. So the type for the UPN is a string. And we'll add the other properties later, and we have the conversation reference, which is also of type string. And I think we have so where are the okay, need to fix it. There we go. Yeah, so we need the title, description, and the visibility as well. Let's close this. Go to our path. Go to the proactive dialogues. So we want to add this here, this here. I think I've created a type for the conversation reference already, so we can ref that. So that's even easier. So we ref the conversation reference. I'll mod it a little bit. What description are we giving it here? So the title is the user principal name. We go. So now we have created the trigger. Well, not ready, of course. So here it's using the dialog subscription request, but that is I think we do not need any parameters initially. Well, that's not true. We want to give it a title and maybe a description, but at least a title. So let's do that. So let's copy the schema from here and let's put it there. Let's remove this. We need just one, just title. Like so. Okay, so this is gonna post our proactive dialogues. So it's gonna create the subscription. We also need one to delete the subscription. We're gonna use one of the existing dialogues for that as well. I'll take this. Proactive dialogues. Yeah, so I'm going to use the tenant and the ID. It's going to do a delete. And subscribe proactive dialogues. Active dialogue. Proactive dialogue and subscribe. It's going to take in the tenant ID and the ID, and it's going to do the unregistration. So let's implement this webhook. And for that, we're going to use the Smart Dialogues controller as a base, because we're doing something similar. Where's my why are my function keys sticky? My F2 key is not working anymore. Oh, my bad. Still running, so therefore I could not make any changes. So we're going to rename it to Proactive Dialogues. We can also rename, because it can also rename correct. Smart dialogues. So this, we're just gonna leave that for now. So we have a register, and we have a delete and a delete. So, proactive dialogues. And this is using the smart dialogue. entity. So this is going to be a proactive dialog entity. We have no description at this moment, so let's get rid of that. Give it a title instead of a intent. It's a proactive dialog. Proactive dialog. Yes, we need to create an instance of this. We create a method to get all the proactive dialogues. It's going to return numerable. So, okay, now we can use the register proactive dialog methods. And this is gonna remain the same. And register proactive dialog. This should work too. So let's start it and see if we can now register a proactive dialog. So let's say we want to make a pizza update method. So for example, your pizza will be delivered in 5 minutes. We're gonna send that to our user. It's gonna be an async solution. Because it depends how long it will take for the pizza to be ready. And let's assume that there is some kind of system that sends out a notification that the pizza are ready, and or that the delivery person is within a 5-minute radius of your house. And that event is the input to start that proactive conversation. So we have a Coco delivery date dialog. So we create this new logic app, and it takes a few seconds. Here it is. Now, before we can actually use our new trigger, we need to update our custom connector first. With the OpenAPI modifications that we did. So we're gonna import our OpenAPI specification and check out the definition, and we should now have a proactive dialog unsubscribe. Here it is. And we should have a proactive dialog subscribe, whether we have an issue with that. So let's figure out what that issue is. And it should be somewhere at the bottom. Webhooks must have one parameter marked with XMS notification URL. It's correct. And I think I forgot to add it. So let's switch back to our OpenAPI specification. And let's go to our trigger. And here we have the parameters that we have defined. Sorry. Yes. This is the delete, so. Here is the post. It was collapsed. So we have defined one property, exactly one property, and that is title. But we need to have one more, which is the callback URL. So let's add it. I believe we call it callback URI in our model. It should be this. So it's callback URL. So let's name it callback URL. It is internal because you should not be able to see it. And yeah, well, this is the callback URL. Nice typing. Callback URL. And we need to add one thing more, which is that this is the well, this is the callback URL, and maybe we can take that from our dynamic schema, which we have here, I believe. No, we don't. Oh, this is the schema. No, we should take a look at the other dialog, other trigger. So this is a trigger as well. And this takes a dialog subscription request. So let's go here and find the dialog subscription request. And it has a lot of things, but what we are interested in is this one. And we can just copy it. What we needed to add was this last particular piece. So, sorry, for scrolling, we need to go here. Then we should update this little puppy. And now it has this important thing, which indicates that this property is actually the notification URL for a webhook. So we go back to our OpenAPI specification or our custom connector, and we import the OpenAPI specification. And now we save it. We did. So what else is going on? Callback URL parameter must have required an internal visibility selected. Doesn't it? It's internal, but we have not added to the required. So again, let's go back to the type of subscription requests, which has this list for the required. Go back to our here it is. And specify it here. We don't have an app ID. We don't have a subscription. And instead of a intent, we have a title, which is also required. Okay, so let's re-import our OpenAPI specification again. And this time it is correct. So the issues are gone. Perfect. So now we have this body here with the callback URL and the title. And we have this notification that we receive from our webhook, which includes the conversation reference and the user principal name. This looks good. So let's update our connector. And then once that is done, we'll go over here to our Logic App Designer. We're going to start with a blank. We're going to take our tests, and we have now this additional trigger, start proactive dialog. Let's select it, and we can give it a title. Let's give it a title of a delivery update, because we're going to use this dialog to send updates on our pizza deliveries to users that made an order. And now if we save it, so let's set breakpoints so that we can actually see this working. So we're gonna see this register API gonna get called, but not this time the unregister, because this is the first time that we're gonna create this webhook. So there's not a previous one that needs unregistering. So let's save. And I was expecting, it took a few seconds, but here we have now the webhook subscription. We receive a callback URL with the title, and this is what we're gonna store in our Cosmos DB, and we send back an URL with our dialog. So now if we take a look at our Cosmos DB, I see that I made an error. But I do not see I filtered it to smart dialog. It's not a smart dialog. It's a proactive dialog. So let's just filter on tenant ID, and here we have our proactive dialog with our title and our callback URL. And from this point in time, we can actually call this callback URL, send the expected payload, and then do something with it. But first, let's try to add another action. For example, send a message to the user, and this time we want to tell the user your pizza will be delivered in 5 minutes. And that's basically what we want to send proactively to our user. Now, we can test this out if this works. But now let's just go create a action first so that we can actually start this particular dialog. And in order to do that, we're gonna create a new action to start the proactive dialogues. So maybe, what should we call that? I'm thinking what I could best use as a starting point. Maybe the reply. Reply is sending a message. So let's take this. Let's go to our proactive dialogues and let's add so So we do not know the tenant ID from the designer, so we should just go with the ID of the dialog. And we want to make that selectable eventually from a drop-down list. Proactive dialogs. Start. Singular. Oh, maybe we want to do start. So that's the URL that we want to use to start a proactive dialog, and we take in a parameter which is in the, not in the body, but in the path. The name is ID. The type is string. Required is true. So that's this ID that we want to put that in anyway. We also want in the body a parameter for the UPN of the user. Let's take this. Title is visibility, is important. And here we have the UPN as the single property. User name of the user. The user principal name. Okay, so that's I think what we need in sending or starting a proactive dialogue. So let's see if we have created our OpenAI specification correctly. To import our definition, we now have a proactive dialogue start. The proactive dialogue start has an ID in the path. Why is the name still ID? I want to name it dialogue, so let's see what makes of that. And oh, here we have so it must be named ID, and the XMS summary should be dialogue, I guess. So it's not the title. XMS summary. So let's import it again. See if that fixed it. Start a product dialog. Summary is now dialog. It is important, it is required. And we also have a body, which has a user principal name. Let's make sure that it's capitalized, because I think we use that everywhere else as well. Import it again. And update our connector. Now we have this dialog. Now let's add another dialog, another logic app, sorry. On delivery update. Not a dialog, so I'm not gonna name it as such. But it's just starting the dialogue. So here we have the on delivery update. I'm going to use the recurrence. And let's set it to every 3 minutes is fine. And we should now have an extra action. Start a proactive dialogue with the user. So for now we need to type in the name of the dialogue, or sorry, the ID of the dialogue. So let's go here and take this ID. We're going to hide that in the future, of course. And let's try to send, sorry, we're in the demo tenant. Let me quickly get the username, the user that I'm testing with. Let's send a proactive message to this user. So this is going to call an API that does not exist yet, so let's fix that. So here we have the proactive dialogues controller. Let's add a start. So therefore we're going to use a different template. Proactive dialogues. Then we expect the ID, and then start is a post. Let's call it start. We're going to expect an ID. Yeah, so we had a created a get proactive dialogues plural. Now let's create a proactive dialogue. It's going to return a proactive dialogue. And that's not going to be the intent, but the ID. Proactive dialogue. And since we are looking for a singular, we can use a different construct, container dots. Read item async. And the item type is this. And then we feed in the ID, new partition key with the ID. Sorry. And that's what we're going to return. And since it's async, we need to await it. So this will return the proactive dialogue with that ID. So we have this start here. We can now do the get proactive dialogue with the tenant ID and the ID that we received. Then we have dialogue. Next, we want to have the conversation reference. That's also something that we receive, which is a body. let's create a start proactive dialogue requests. Bring it over to the models. And this will have a property type string with the UPN of the user. And it's a JSON property. Name is UPN. So that's the request. Now next is that we look up the conversation reference. Await conversation service dot get conversation reference. By UPN, so we're gonna input the requests UPN. We do not have that option yet, so we'll have to create this. So instead that we put in a user, we have a UPN. We cannot use the read item async because we do not know the ID, because the UPN isn't the ID of the conversation reference. So instead we're gonna query. So we're gonna use the iterator pattern we saw earlier. So basically this. We're gonna look for conversation references. Obviously also need to input ID, UPN. So we're going to look for the conversation reference. basically we want to query for the UPN here. Create or download a Cosmos DB query cheat sheet. So this time we do not need it. Queryable maybe. Okay, so this should do the trick for getting conversation reference. We just quit if we did not find a conversation reference. Return new. Okay, results. That's fine. Otherwise, we're going to use the dialog entity to start a new dialog, and we're going to take some code from the register dialog because it's doing something similar. So we're going to build up that body. We want to have the conversation reference. Conversation ID. Go. We're gonna want to have the UN. That's it. Then we're gonna construct the contents for our post message. And we're gonna send it to our dialog entity, and here we should have the fallback URL. And then finally, I'm gonna send back an OK results. Alright, so that should do the trick. Right, what errors do we have? So we should have here. Should do it better. If we can tell, it's already trying to start our proactive dialogue. Now just a matter of time for it will invoke it again, or we can force it. We'll go here and say done. Method not allowed. just doing a post to API with the ID /start. Maybe this is the difference. Method not allowed. Okay. Let's just see if this works. It has something to do with that ID, with the parameters. Method not allowed still. No, it's missing /API. Sheesh. Try again. Boom. And we have the UPN as well. Yeah, it's not gonna work. This must be the tenant ID. Not the ID, tenant ID. We'll just retry. Here we go. So we have this dialog entity. Excellent. Next, do we get a conversation reference? Yes, we do. So we create a body with that conversation reference ID and the UPN. And we're gonna start. It's also starting automatically again. Unauthorized. What did that again have to do? Now at least this works. And then we should have this delivery update dialog that should have fired. And it is. It's hanging now here. And why? It had something to do with the URL. Yes, I know.
It's dark out, I sit in bed, I feel asleep, dark in my eyes. Still awake this late at night. A day done and nothing to write. Some say it's difficult to find, and the words they just stay inside. How about you start at the beginning? You woke up, go on, I'll listen. Is life like this? Pen to paper alone like this? Is this how they'll see me when I'm gone? Then should I dismiss my real thoughts to protect my kids?
So
Should I let them
let's
see my weaknesses?
make sure
How
that
will they remember
this
me
thing
when I'm gone?
doesn't continue to fire every 3 minutes. Well, let's just set
Should
it
I let them see my
every 3 months.
weaknesses? How will they
This
remember
requires us to manually trigger it.
So I
So
recorded
what is the surface?
wild and mundane, 'cause I'm a whole person like them too. I'll tell the truth when I was wrong, and what I sacrificed to be strong. I'll write every day, I'm in the way, even make it a habit that I don't lose. 'Cause I look back to with a warmer heart at the younger girl I once was. My journal's like a link book to my brain, so reach out to it, cross the gate. 'Cause everything I am is safe here in my mind. Someone told me that I couldn't be myself. I would be me even more through my doubts. borderline reckless. I mostly broke promises up with myself when I told myself till I could feel no more breath. I'd be better than this, I'd be
Do
better
I
than this.
perhaps have
Only managed
full
to
conversation
disappoint myself. No
references?
one knows, so they can't force me to look for help. It's a cycle I've repeated. I know so well, but it's secret. Can you keep it? It's dark out, I sit in bed.
Some of which are actually dead.
Still awake this late at night. A day done and nothing to write. Some say it's difficult to find.
Hmm.
Words they just stay inside. How about you start at the beginning? If you woke up, go on a listen.
So if I do this from Teams, if I say demo, then it works. Okay, so I need to make sure that we trust that service URL after we restart the bot, otherwise it is not authenticated. So that explains why it works in the other scenario, where we initiate a dialog. Then at least we start off with a message to the bot that authenticates that service URL is automatically added to the cache, and then we can send back messages. But if you restart the bot and start initiating messages from the bot without the user acting first, the service URL isn't cached at the moment, and it will throw that unauthorized exception. So what we do now, before we send the reply, so we retrieve the conversation reference and we trust that service URL. And that should ensure that we have now restarted the bot, but now when we initiate our proactive dialog, that it should work. So it has trusted this service URL, and now we can skip this. I should have to skip that. And we now receive our new proactive message. Excellent. So this is a good basis to build up upon. And well, yeah, so it's a good start. So now what we can do, we have now an action that we can throw in any loop flow or any logic app where we can start a dialogue for a specific user. And currently we need to input the ID here, but we will change that in a next stream to be a drop-down list of dialogues that we retrieve from the API. But for now we have inputted the ID directly, so it will trigger this dialogue for this user, and we will retrieve the conversation reference of this user, and we will start the other dialogue that we have created here. We will start this using that payload. We just gave this a title, and we will receive a conversation reference of that user, and we can start interacting with it, and that's excellent. Yeah, so the other thing we need to take care if the user does not have a conversation reference either, because it's has not connected with the bot before, or it could be that the conversation reference that we retrieve is not valid anymore, so we need to handle those edge cases. And we should make sure that we can use a drop-down to select the dialog from, to make it easier to pick the correct dialog to start. And yeah, that means that we can build on from there. That's very cool. I'm gonna leave it today at this point. So I'm gonna leave today at this point. I'm gonna wrap up. The Formula 1 qualification is about to start in about 15 minutes. So I'm gonna watch that and hopefully see some spectacular pole position and times. If you're gonna do that as well, have a great qualification. Otherwise, have a very good day to you. Enjoy your time, and hopefully I'll see you next time, and that could be on Monday evening. That's evening for me at 7 p.m. Central European time or at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So check back then, and in the meantime, don't forget to follow me. I'm trying to get to 50 followers so that I become a Twitch affiliate, hopefully. So click that follow button. Also turn on the notifications so that you can always receive a notification when I'm live. Have a good day, and hopefully see you next time.